Good day, this is Dr. T, and this is the start of another biannual chemistry conference vlog. So as I've done the last couple of years, I'm doing a vlog kind of recap what I learned each day from the biannual conference on chemical education. In this case, it's 2026. Of course, you'll notice that this doesn't exactly look like the campus of the University of Wisconsin. There are giant mounds and a big wooded area. Yeah, this is, sorry, trying not to make y'all sick. This is the Cahokia Mounds, a UNESCO World Heritage Site located in Illinois, in East St. Louis. So basically St. Louis, but on the Illinois side of the river. And this is day -2 of the conference. So I'm actually on the way to the conference and decided to stop by St. Louis because why not? St. Louis is great. And I'd heard about this place from Ancient Americas, the YouTube channel. So figured I'd check them out. Really a nice place, worth a visit. And like various things on the topic, I want to cover a few things I've learned on the topic of education. One, the tour over here, quite interesting. This was a Native American community for the Mississippian period. So this is, I think, like 900 to 1300 AD, and this would have been a massive, bustling city, larger than that of London. This was huge, one of the larger cities on the planet at this point. Not the largest by a long shot, but definitely quite large. And then for various reasons, after the 12th century, kind of tanked. And thus the culture kind of rearranged and became more of what we now know as the Native American cultures that we have in the lower 48, at least the eastern half. Now, from this, a couple interesting takeaways. One, I was rather shocked to learn, they had a lot of agriculture, a lot of corn, makes perfect sense. They weren't doing the Three Sisters. So a little bit of tie-in for my biochem class. They had a lot of health issues because they were eating a ton of corn and that was about it, especially the poorer folks. And they would all struggle to live past 40, which of course for me is like, yikes, that's my age. Yeah, 40. Sorry, there is a bug buzzing around here. And severe issues with diabetes, etc., because they were eating a very carb-heavy diet. The other one, and I'm going to get you some B-roll of this, is that the park has created an augmented reality app. And so you get here and they have signs like, hey, download the AR app. It's $5. Like, okay, it's fine. Although I will say, if you're coming here, if you're in St. Louis or going to be around St. Louis and want to kill half a day, definitely a great spot to hang out at. Get the app, but get the app before you come here because it's like a third of a gig. And so better do that over Wi-Fi. It was a little bit of a pain getting that set up because I didn't have Wi-Fi, in the middle of the park. But augmented reality is one of those areas where, you take your camera and use your phone to overlay something on top of the area. And we've seen this in education kind of bouncing around. It's actually kind of died off, I think. The app was created originally in 22. And since I think it was towards the end of the AR hype. AR hype seemed to be like late 20-teens, early 2020s. But this is actually an application where I think from the B-roll you're going to see it's actually useful. And normally a lot of the AR hype was like, yeah, that's nice, who cares? It's not really very helpful, watching a molecule on your desk. Like, yeah, I can just watch it, look at a picture, who cares? But here, being able to move the camera around and see what was where and look at the 3D reproduction of the community is quite helpful, just getting a size and scale of what you're dealing with. So for areas where you're dealing not necessarily with, molecules where you couldn't see them anyways, but things that were once there, it's a really nice touch, or maybe things that will be there in the future kind of stuff. So anything archaeology, architecture, that kind of range. I'm going to have to say the augmented reality, I think, actually shines. I don't think all the hype was worth it, but there's definitely spots where, at least their app shows, there's a use for it. Okay, so this is actually, I was here this morning, it was raining, I left, I came back, hung out over at the St. Louis Museum of Art. Got to check that thing out as well. It's free, which is kind of cool. Got to actually see an N4i. I don't have any pictures of me doing it. I didn't know if I was allowed to take photos or not, but got to see some N4i. That's always fun. Hadn't seen those up front in person. Okay, so you're probably getting bored with this part. I'm getting swarmed with bugs, as you can see me swatting away. So I will turn the video off and see you probably day one of the conference, which will be Sunday. So 2 days for me, about a few seconds for you. Hey, so I'm on the campus of the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and this is the beginning of BCCE proper. The first session I went to today, so this is the Sunday, only one session. There was a couple other sessions, but very light. Didn't actually go to the morning ones because there really wasn't much this morning. It's usually more Monday through Wednesday or the core of the conference. But the first session I went to, which was the evening Sunday session, is logging into the tablet, was on 3D printing and using that for teaching. Really some cool ones. This was honestly almost like this might as well fill some space, but this one turned out good. Okay, 4 speakers. First one was doing accessible 3D printing models for solid state chemistry. Cassie Raymond, I believe his name was. So he did a couple of things. He's basically using Blender. So he's taking either an XML or your crystallography files, converting that into the file for 3D stuff, STL file, and then editing that. Or I think actually what he's more of doing is taking the raw information from crystallography and going, okay, well, this atom is at this coordinates and this atom is at another coordinates. And he's using Blender. And so you take a sphere and you put one here, and you take a sphere, put one there. And so the idea here is he's actually printing out the unit cells. So you can physically hold a unit cell instead of trying to picture the unit cell in your mind kind of thing. And then he's also doing texture coding for atoms. So instead of just using a sphere, you could switch it to whatever that thing a D20 is. I cannot remember the name of that shape. Or you could do something that's very bumpy. I think he said it was like a golf ball, but inverted. You could do kind of wedges on it, or other very tactile ones. And the reason here is that someone who is vision impaired or colorblind could feel the difference. And so, if you have a model of an atom, or a molecule of a model, you could have this, elaborate space-filling model, and they're all just bumps. And so, yeah, I know the hydrogen's smaller than the oxygen, but, a student necessarily isn't going to know that, and it's not that obvious. So which one's the oxygen, which one's the nitrogen? And so he'd worked out a couple of different shapes that he could print, and that worked well for printing, and that were very obvious when you felt them. Okay, so the next one is kind of an adaptation of a 2D lab. So in this case, he is doing 3D printing exercise for connecting ionic compound formulas and names in college level general chemistry course. Andrew Hurton, probably getting that wrong. Basically, the idea here is he's making blocks. He 3D printed the blocks, and the anions have pegs, one for each surplus electron, and the cations have holes, and so the pegs fit into the holes. So you got your magnesium, it's got 2 holes in the bottom. It's got magnesium written on it, and he actually did Braille on the other side. The pegs he set up to be pentagons or pentagonal cylinders, whatever you call that, so that you can't just orientate them any old way, so that all the labels will line up nicely. But he put, the Mg on one side, and then Braille for presumably Mg on the other side, and then the holes on the bottom, and it would have 2 holes. And your chlorides would be a smaller block, half-size block, because it's only one, and it's got its peg and the Cl and then the Braille. And then it only has 1 peg, so you have to put 2 chlorides in on the magnesium. And thus you can kind of build your names out this way. It's been done on a 2D form where you kind of have like cut out tabs on paper, but this way they like physically lock in together. And so it works a bit better. And he had good luck with teaching his students naming using that. He was using, or the school he was at uses a traditional approach, so not atoms first, although I think this would work great on atoms first as well. a little bit more obvious what the electrons are. This was more adaptive learning, or sorry, discovery based, where he didn't tell them what the blocks, the pegs and the things were, except for it's got like electron written on them. The one point that was made is to do the writing as raised instead of sunken in, because you're 3D printing it. You're not doing, you could do color, but it's a pain. You can just color it in with a marker. But if you do raised lettering, it's a little bit more accessible, easier to feel what's going on. The next one, I'll give you the title, Articulated 3D Printed Molecular Models for Active Learning Organic Chemistry, Jeremy Kulserman, probably getting that wrong. This one, basically, he's recreating the space filling model from like the 70s, the original CPK ones in 3D. The issue apparently is the 3D space filling models are much harder to buy. You can buy ball and stick all day long, but the space filling ones, which the closed ones where you actually get, the space filling, and the ones where you see the outside of the atoms, those are much better for steric impacts and actually showing, why you can't put your tert butyl groups right next to each other, that kind of stuff. Those are much less common these days, harder to purchase. So he's basically recreating that and then putting things like magnets in them and allow them to articulate so you can show transitions and doing stereochemistry and that kind of stuff. He also did one where using rubber bands and 3D printing shows you for an SN2 attack in the stereo chemistry switch by having, your leaving group and your nucleophile and then the thing in the middle, and then they actually kind of folds back and forth. It's based on a 1970s era Japanese model for doing that. The Japanese model was folding paper. This is, of course, plastic. As you can tell, that was interesting, but not the one I'm excited about. Honestly, the one I thought was going to be boring, at least for me, but in many respects I'm most excited about, was active learning through 3D printed tools, inexpensive and customizable analytical instruments for laboratory investigations, outreach, and global environmental monitoring collaborations by Long Porter. This one, basically, it sounds like he did more than a few of these, but the one he talked about was his colorimeter. And so it basically makes a 3D stand to hold the test tube or the cuvette, and then a holder for an LED, and then a holder for a phototransistor. But the really cool part is, at least the early versions he's having his students do, is like he made some fancy ones that can be used as like an instrument that are somewhat cheaper than what you'd buy from Vernier, a lot cheaper. But the really cool one I thought was the simplistic version, where he has the students plug in the LED on one side, and it's got the leads, and you got the phototransistor, and you got the leads, you got a couple of batteries, a bunch of alligator clips, and a voltmeter, and it's to show the students what is actually going on. What is the underlying pinnings of what's taking place here? And so they can swap out different LEDs. They get the idea that most instruments are really a voltmeter. Your pH probe, your spectrometers, the whole family of instruments, they're actually voltmeters with weird stuff attached to them. And so this highlights that fact that everything's really a voltmeter. And then they can look at, what color do you want to do? One I think I'm going to use, because it doesn't take anything I don't have, is you take your test tube or your cuvette or whatever, you put your dye in there. If it's a red dye, you ask them, okay, so I'm going to shine a light through it. Which one's going to absorb? And you have a red and a green laser, and you shine the red laser through, and of course, students think it's going to absorb, and it goes right through. And you shine a green laser through, and it stops dead in the tracks. Red 40 does that nicely because it absorbs right on the green. So I think this is a really cool idea. Definitely great if you're doing any kind of instrumentation to really show what's going on. And then you can kind of customize it. And he went on to making a little bit, nicer 3D mounting, and then programming an Arduino and that kind of stuff, which is also kind of a cool idea. So depending on how far you want to go with this, but you can also get into, okay, we're recording and the voltage is basically %T. Why would we use %T? Oh yeah, because, logarithms and stuff. So it really gets in the nitty gritty of why the instruments are doing by building a very, very primitive instrument. And the 3D printing part is basically just the holder to hold everything in place, because of course that's much easier to do by 3D printing than trying, gluing cardboard or whatever together. Okay, so that's the exciting part. I'm going to head over to whatever random social thing they've got going on, and I will see you on Monday, which will be a few seconds for you and about 12 hours for me. Okay, so I'm going to talk quietly because I'm in a building, but this is the end of the first session on Monday. So green chemistry, I'm doing 3 green chemistry sections today, but the first 4 talks, definitely some interesting ones. First one was a teaching model for high school. They were actually doing like a cross-cultural. So they did Zoom meetings with high school students between multiple different countries with different languages, different cultures, which I thought was really interesting. They did a really cool lab where they used tea extract, specifically the gallic acid, binding with iron that forms a dark complex, and then do it spectrophotometrically. Really kind of cool. The next one was a spice course, basically an online course about spices for chemistry, non-chemistry, just general ed classes. Might make a nice GC2Y course. Definitely could be interesting, just kind of chemistry, sustainability, systems thinking, economics, that whole mess, adulteration when it comes to spices. So I thought that was a nice topic. The next one was on chemical engineering education. Main take home, I think, for this one and this second one was we need to be looking at green chemistry metrics and teaching those in lower level courses, Gen Chem, OChem, specifically atom economy, but also start talking about process, safety systems, process safety. I really thought there was an interesting one, if I was teaching organic chemistry, I would dive into, and that's a retrosynthesis tree. Basically, you start out with the chemical you want, and then you have all the different pathways of getting there, and you evaluate each leg of the tree on how best to get to where you want to go based on things like cost, sustainability, hazards. Hazards was a big topic. And then more advanced topics like E-factor and PMI calculations, maybe on the to-do list, but not for the lower level classes, and maybe more for the chemical engineering classes. The last talk was more of a generic organic one. There was an interesting reaction, tetrachloro-1,4-benzoquinone reacting with ammonia to yield 2,5-dinitroamino-3,6-dichloro-1,4-benzoquinone. Okay, I'm not 100% positive on that one. I didn't get it all the way typed out, so I had to use AI to help me clarify which molecule they're making, but I think that's the right one. It looks like the right structure. Basically, the first one's yellow, the last one's, I think, like red or purple. And so when you do a chromatography of it, you see the bands really well. And so that makes a very nice chromatography one. And then they went with this much further where they then evaluating atom economy, waste production, cost, environmental impact. And then apparently this reaction is very similar to one for a cancer pharmaceutical. And so you can then kind of do the ethics of manufacturing that cancer pharmaceutical, and that was their report. So definitely a nice topic, thought it would be interesting. Now, one of the reasons I'm videoing here, and it's kind of dull background, is this is a study nook, and I thought this was quite cool, so I'm going to show you around the study nook. Sorry if this makes anyone sick. But we have study nook from outside, and then even outlet. So absolutely wonderful little study nook built into the building. With that said, I've got 2 more sessions for today. We'll see you around lunchtime. Okay, so this is nearing the end of Monday. Didn't get a chance to record video for the late morning session. So this is late morning and the afternoon session. Both for green chemistry again. The morning session, about half the evening session, sorry. The morning session, about half the evening session, were basically ways of adapting classes and experiments to be more green or more green chemistry topic. I'm not going to try and put them on here. Most of them were very organic-y, so a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I've got them in my notes that I'll share with those who are interested. The one point I did want to bring on this one is one of those kind of sneaky ones where for their majors organic class, they did the first half, 3/4 of the class like normal, but then the final project was basically to take one of the experiments they have done previously and make it more green. And this was not graded on a successful completion. So, it had a rubric. It was based on communication, planning, etc., but not based on were they actually successful in doing the chemistry, because, research usually doesn't work the first time. And then on the off chance that they actually are successful, they then take the new green version and put that back into the normal labs. So I thought that was kind of cool. They said they were doing that for the chromatography. Okay, 2 of the sessions in the evening were more regulatory. So ACS and affiliated organizations are building up resources for learning how to teach green chemistry, mentoring networks or facilitation networks to help faculty, including a course by Beyond B9, I believe it is, and then a FNN. I do not know what that stands for, but basically a faculty, probably it's FMN, Faculty Mentoring Network is almost certainly what this says, by Bio something. I'm going to put links in the description. They're in my notes. I hope they're in my notes. Hopefully there's links in the description that are basically, facilitating green chemistry transition. One of the major points, though, that was brought up, ACS certification, it is now a hard requirement for students to have a working knowledge of the 12 principles of green chemistry, and that companies are very much expecting this from their future employees. They don't want to have to train students in green chemistry because they're a company, not a school. So this is something that is not an option. We absolutely have to cover, which, kind of knew that already. That's one of the reasons why I was going to the green chemistry sessions. So with that said, I'm going to head over to poster presentations. I already gave mine, but I didn't see anyone else's. And with that, I will see you in the next clip. Okay, so end of Monday, just did the poster session. 3 posters caught my eye. First was from flash report to technical report. A flash report is basically an advanced CER report. So it's a CER report, but it's going to have an abstract with materials and methods as well as a research question. So basically it's a more complete version of the CER report. And then they were talking about guiding students from going from the flash report to a more technical report. So start out with flash in Gen Chem 1 and then go to full, written report by OChem. Just thought that was an interesting and different take on the CER report, a slightly more advanced one. I still like the CER report, so I don't think I'm going to switch over, but it was an interesting idea. Next one was an exploration of neurodiversity in Gen Chem. So this was one of those really kind of cool ones when I saw this. So there's been a bit of research. I don't know if I want to say a lot, but there's been a non-trivial amount, a fairly decent amount of research about sense of belonging, academic mindset, imposter syndrome, and a bunch of other kind of emotional relationships with sciences and doing coursework. And, having a high sense of belonging is strongly correlated with success. I think the same goes for academic mindset and negative correlation with imposter syndrome, And most of those, or basically almost all the studies so far, have been on neurotypical students. And this individual is doing neurodiverse students, just kind of a catch-all neurodiverse, so everything under the sun. And what was found was that there's definitely a fairly significant decrease in sense of belonging, academic mindset, increase in imposter syndrome for neurodiverse students compared to their neurotypical classmates, and that this is a fairly reliable, it actually is the case. Then the last poster that caught my attention was teaching ethics through film. So I really like this one. I've been wanting to do something ethics related. And the idea here, this was kind of a bioethics, I guess. So 3 films were done. In Biochem 1, the film was Awakenings, which is a 1990 film based off of an Oliver Sacks fictionalized autobiography concerning a prolonged sleeping sickness, of which there was an epidemic in the early mid-20th century, so like 1919 to 1930, and then the treatment with L-DOPA, which ultimately didn't work particularly well. It, provided relief, but only very temporary. The next was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. This is, sorry, bug. I think a 2017 film, and this is the HeLa cells. Henrietta Lacks was an African-American woman in the mid-20th century, died, I think, of cancer, but without asking her permission or giving her family, even mentioning it to her family, her cells became one of the first immortal cell lines, known as HeLa. Very important for cell research. And of course, for many, many years, it was not tied back to her at all. And then all of a sudden, it came out that her cell lines were used without anyone's permission or knowledge, kind of thing, and the ethics behind that. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks was shown in Biochem 2, and then in Advanced Cell Bio was Gattaca. Gattaca is a 1997 sci-fi action thriller about a dystopian future with heavy gene editing, and discussions can be held around things like eugenics, genetic predeterministic views, and other areas. So I thought it was a really nice idea of bringing ethics, using film as a narrative structure to talk about ethics, and then bringing that into a classroom setting. Okay, so this basically wraps up Monday. I need to go get my poster, which is hanging up for the passive poster session, and then I will see you in the next clip, which for me will be Tuesday morning. Okay, so this is Tuesday lunch break. The first two sessions were both humanities, pedagogies, and teaching chemistry or something like that. A lot of it was connecting art and cooking to chemistry. So that was basically the main theme. And as I'm going through the various seminars, I'm realizing those are two areas where the chemistry is very much up front. The visual arts, you've got all the pigments, you've got the binding agents, you got the mediums, very, very chemistry focused. Likewise, with cooking, cooking is applied chemistry. Let's just be honest with that one. A couple of takeaways. One lab I'm kind of interested in trying out would be a intermolecular forces lab, probably for a lower level course. So maybe the educational course, maybe 1151. But an intermolecular forces lab where you're doing painting and it's kind of a watercolors. Waiting for the bus to go by. So you're doing painting, you do some watercolors, but you also include some, say, wax on there. So they were doing these auroras where they would do a wax ring around it with crayon and then paint an aurora picture. And then you can add salt to it or drops of ethanol while it's still wet, and that will rearrange the dye. And so the salt crystals will dissolve. They'll give kind of a speckled. This may not have been the best spot to pick on campus, but you put salt crystals, you get this kind of speckling pattern as they dissolve. You can do drops of ethanol, changes the intermolecular forces there. This really, I will be running the noise canceling on this one. Okay, I was reminded of an art project I did in first grade. So let's take this back a while. Mr. French, my first grade teacher, our art teacher, had us, make like a landscape painting. I think I still have this thing. Landscape in crayon, because, first grade. And then there was like this melt phase that I don't quite remember the detail. Like you melted the crayons and then it got a dye bath. And so all the blank white space was dyed. So something where you making a picture with crayon or colored pencil and then doing watercolor on top of that, or maybe even more interesting where you do different mediums, pencil, crayon, colored pencil. Colored pencil and crayon are basically the same thing, at least to the best of my knowledge. But then maybe a water-soluble ink, and then you watercolor over it. Might have some really interesting responses, and where you can see kind of the effect of IMFs. The non-polars are just going to sit there, and the polars are going to get up and move. And so they talked about the polarity of the paper and all that kind of stuff. So definitely quite interesting. Okay, a couple other high points. One was doing cooking in their biochem lab. And of course, you can't cook in a lab. So the way he ended up getting an industrial kitchen, I thought this was a really great idea, is he was in an area that had a lot of churches, and one of the local churches happened to have an industrial kitchen. He calls them up like, hey, you're probably not using this on a Thursday morning. Could I come over and could we cook something in your kitchen? And apparently they said sure, and that's what they did. So he did basically cinnamon rolls and talked about a lot of the chemistry and biochem aspects of the cinnamon roll and the cooking process, etc. Cinnamon roll was picked because he thought that would be low allergy concern. So even if you go need it, it probably wouldn't be too toxic. Another talk was on kind of museums and using the museum as a liminal space, kind of a transitioning between worlds, between chemistry and art, that kind of area. Another talk was looking at ancient chemical texts. This is kind of a chemical history. I really wasn't quite for sure. It was labeled as an inorganic chemical. This was labeled as an inorganic chemical course, but they were reading topics from Plato, Boyle, Newton, and Agricola, I think is how you pronounce his name. It's definitely an interesting area, but kind of looking at the discovery and history of inorganic chemistry. So I thought it was an interesting one, and looking at the ancient manuscripts kind of thing. And that one was tag team with one of the librarians, which I thought was rather interesting. One topic that I thought was an interesting one, where the class was an upper level green chemistry course, and he would assign readings. The students would respond to the readings, and then he would include snippets of their responses into the class lecture, and the class would discuss some of the responses. Basically, the 2 or 3 best responses got put into the lecture slides, and they discussed it. And there'd be topics such as lipophilic compounds, and then responses might include ideas such as women's health. And another interesting one where it's like lipophilic compounds are fat soluble. If someone's obese, they lose weight. They may have stored up a bunch of these lipophilic compounds, and then they all get released as they have lost weight. And so you can get re-exposure and potentially serious effects by losing weight rapidly, which I thought was a particularly interesting take on this. And so then using student feedback and trying to be very collaborative with the students for the course. Another one, I'm not for sure where they were doing infographics and having the students make those. I kind of do something like that in my eyesight course. But one they were also doing is they were doing a gallery walk, and they had students where they would put up post-it notes that had to have pros and cons. But the other one I thought was really interesting is they had students do peer review. They graded the peer review, not the assignment that was being peer reviewed, but the peer review of the assignment. So that was an actual graded assignment, was the peer review of somebody else's work. And of course, there was more than just peer review. There's instructor review, etc. Okay, so that is the morning part. I'm moving on. I think after the break, I'll do posters, and then in transitioning to career or something. You'll find out in a few seconds. I will find out in several minutes. So with that said, see you in a few seconds. Okay, so finish up the last set of talks for today. This is Tuesday afternoon. And the talks were on career readiness, kind of preparing students for their postgraduate work. So whatever they're doing after they leave us. The first 3 talks were on NACE core competencies, NACE. I'm not for sure what the acronym stands for. It's an organization. And the core competencies are going to be skills future employees need to have to be successful in their career. These are teamwork, communication, critical thinking, leadership, professionalism, equity and inclusion, and then the 8th skill is career and self-development. The latter one, my understanding, or kind of the take I took on this one, is to be able to self-learn and to problem solving by growing one skill set. The main take home of the first 3 ones were we need to be able to help students identify that they're already learning those skills. 1, to help them learn the skills, 2, to kind of keep them a little bit motivated, and 3, to see why they're taking classes that maybe, have nothing to do with their major and what they'll do in the future, are in reality quite important for their future and what they'll be doing. The last talk was about an STEM program where they were creating mentor groups for transferring in students and helping them build student identity with as being a scientist, or identity as being a scientist, and helping them make connections. Basically, kind of the take home is connections are absolutely critical. So with that, heading to kind of the second half of the poster session. The first half, same posters. I didn't see a lot of notes, but it was really crowded, so I'm gonna take another gander. You may or may not see me record something about more posters. Otherwise, Wednesday is a workshop, and that will be what you're seeing in a few seconds. Okay, so this probably should have been 2 videos because I've covered a lot. This is Wednesday afternoon, so I've got 2 more sessions at BCCE. But I was able to get back to the poster session without all of the people, and so I could actually take time to look at the posters. We're not just squeezing my way through people like a bait fish. Saw several actually that were quite interesting. One, Let's Roll. Basically, it was, if you've ever seen the video series Roll for Sandwich, where the guy has a bunch of different tables and he rolls a die and picks things off of each table to make a sandwich. Like the first one's the bread, the next one's the condiments, that kind of stuff. But instead of sandwiches, it's doing homework problems for organic chemistry. So I thought that was a nice idea. You have a bunch of different tables, like, a bunch of functional groups and a bunch of reagents or something. And so you'd roll and get, a part of an equation. You have to solve the equation. You can do other things. But I did all the homework. This one, they compared student success versus percent of homework completed, and something like a quarter or more of their students who completed all of the homework, so had 100% completion on the homework, failed the class. Or I think the technical term was not able to continue on the current chemical journey or something. So probably DFW. That's not a good sign. And they tried a bunch of different homework systems, which is really interesting. I think this was relatively consistent through homework systems. There's a group that was doing Lewis structures, did a model kit to do Lewis structures, and I do Lewis structures from Symbol. It's very much not normal, but it's basically the way that I was taught by my father, who learned it from a textbook that I have still from 1971, where you draw the Lewis symbol and you connect the dots. Someone was working on making a model kit doing that. If that comes up for sale, I want it. I don't think they're ready. They're selling a game of some sort that I wasn't particularly interested in, or a game ready to kickstart the game. But if they kickstart this thing, oh man, I want that. There was one discussing free online resources for chemistry practice and whatnot. And the other one I thought was particularly cool was a 3D printed intro to standard curves. Basically, they made a bunch of 3D blocks, or 3D printed blocks. Now, when you 3D print something, you don't make it solid, typically, because you waste a ton of filament, and the filament is surprisingly expensive. But you don't make it completely hollow either, because then it's very fragile. So you have this infill, where it's kind of a honeycomb on the inside. And so they printed a bunch of different blocks with different infills. Of course, different infill means you're going to have a different density, because air to plastic ratio. And so then students would calibrate a standard curve for density versus infill, and then have an unknown mystery block that they had to calculate the percent infill from the standard curve. I thought that was cool. That's we do something similar with sugar solution, but that's a lot less sticky. Okay, so that was last night. Then I went to Birds of the Feather, which is kind of the gathering chat group for green chemistry. It was everyone standing around chatting in small squares, and I don't do that well, so I just left. Then did the Writing Green Chemistry Case Studies workshop. Got some resources for this, but several of the take-home kind of ideas that I got from this one, I still no one's got a list of like all the green chemistry topics. But the idea on case studies is those are expected, even though there's no real tradition of case studies in the sciences, at least not like there are in business law, etc. However, they did want, ACS is expecting us to use case studies to teach green chemistry. And the idea here, though, is case studies could be anything from like a full semester-long project-based learning thing, or it could be a 5-minute intro discussion. So basically drawing direct connection between real-life examples and the activities there. So I think this is definitely fairly straightforward. I think I'm going to add in for all my modules a micro case study. Bump the microphone. A micro case study where I talk about some event or thing relative to green chemistry and the content, or at least the content, and then try and get as much green chemistry in there as possible. Presumably, if we all do that or do something like that, we'll hit all the points in green chemistry. Still wish I had a list of all those points, though. Make my life so much easier. Then I went to another Birds of the Feather. This was more of a seminar. It should have been a seminar. I wish it was a seminar. The room was packed, and this was on digital accessibility. A lot of stuff I already knew. It was funny. They had us raise our hands. You know, how much do you know? One finger, basically nothing. Four fingers, you know a lot. A couple points that were brought up that I was not aware of. Some schools, there is and I figured this was the case. There's complete disagreements on what the requirements are, even within a school, between disability, Center for Teaching and Learning, and the lawyers. They don't agree. Lawyers between one school and another do not agree. There's complete chaos. Shocking, I know. Some schools are actually telling that student content needs to be WCAG compatible, at least student content that's shared with other students. And that's particularly even a student emailing another student, which email is pretty easy to get WCAG compatible. Just type it. As I knew, LaTeX, basically not compliant, need to convert that to HTML. Trying to see, there was something else on that list that I thought I need. Oh, there was a discussion that you do want students doing WCAG compliant work. And if only so that they can say that they have done that on their resume, that being able to, because there's a lot of areas where they need to be WCAG compliant. And so that's a skill they now need to learn. Okay, so that was the high points, I think. I got a couple of links to some resources on that one. The American Chemical Society something disabilities group, I'll put a link down in the description, has an ebook with all things chemical accessibility. From my understanding, I haven't read the book yet, but digital, but also to service dogs in labs, which is, Google that. There's a really great cover photo from one of the CNE news articles with the dog in a lab coat and goggles and booties, etc. It's very helpful, very practical, and very cute. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to sign off, and I will see you in maybe 1 or 2 more clips, possibly 3. We'll see how things go. So, see you then. Okay, so this is a view out the dorm room window that I've been staying in. Staying in one of the college dorms, and nice view. I don't know what the camera's going to pick up, but 6th floor, great view outside, gorgeous at night. Anyways, so went to the Wednesday evening seminar. This one was climate change and sustainability. Only 3 talks. 2 that I want to talk about. Actually, I'll talk about all 3. First one was a soil chemistry class, or soil chemistry lab in Gen Chem. They had a restored prairie that they went out, took soil samples from, brought them back, and basically ran fairly standard soil chemistry assays for, more or less commercial kits, and monitored it over the course of years. They also did organic matter, which was basically dry it, weigh it, burn it, weigh it, and so hopefully carbon goes away. So I guess it's probably more like ash it, is my guess. Interesting lab, something that would be kind of cool to do. Don't exactly have a restored prairie that would be helpful to monitor over the course of a decade or 2, but would be interesting. Next one was doing kind of some more Curie-based stuff. And one of the things he was doing is there's something called 9 Sigma, which my understanding is kind of like an exchange. Different organizations that need small research projects done, post it there, and then groups doing Curies can do the small research project and then send it off. That way it actually gives meaning. You're actually doing something useful. The last one was talking about a microwave lab for organics. So they're doing organic synthesis. They were making paracetamol, Tylenol basically, and then they were making another compound using a microwave, the reaction microwave, not a warm up the popcorn microwave, but an actual chemical reaction microwave. Definitely kind of cool. Once again, organic, not really my thing. I think we do have a microwave though, so it might be an option. I'll forward along with the notes for the organic chemists. Otherwise, that was it for tonight. We've got a social gathering that I'll probably pop in, pop out of. One more seminar on Thursday, which I'll give a short report on that one. In which case, that's it for the conference. And I'll be heading on back. Might do a quick clip from Mackinac Island. Probably won't. Otherwise, see you then. Okay, wrapping up conference. So last session, which is the last session I'm going to, the camera's literally on the roof of the car right now, was on safety. Two major talking points. First three sessions were on, or the first three speakers, I should say, were on the ramp method and implementing it in their chemistry classes. The first one was actually a member of the ACS Safety Council and kind of pointing out the resources they have. There's at least two safety ebooks, both free. One's an older PDF, the other one's the newer one. The newer one is actually a little bit more exciting, even though the other two speakers didn't use it. And that one they all use RAMP, which is recognize hazards, analyze risk, modify exposure. It'll be on the screen somewhere. And then P is prevent or prepare for emergencies. Sorry, not prevent, but prepare for emergencies. And the newer ebook, which is actually a third edition, but the previous two were published through Wiley, and then ACS got the copyright for the third edition, is built in kind of a structured approach so that it can be done either as one big book, like you could use it for a safety course, or the way the sections are lined up, the middle number of each section number is actually kind of the level. So you got like 1.1.1, 1.1.2, then 1.2.1. And the idea would be you could do all the blank 0.1s in one course and then all the blank 0.2s in another course, or some other kind of scaffolding. The speaker basically would do some of the 0.1s in Gen Chem 1, some of the rest of the 0.1s in Gen Chem 2, and then the idea would then be to do the blank 0.2s in Organic 1, finish those up in Organic 2, and so on and so forth. So you can kind of build that into the entire chemistry curriculum. Really something that might be kind of prepare for something we're looking on a resume, I think. So I think this is something might be worth thinking about as kind of a resume building kind of structure. Also, keep our students safe, prepare them for the future. Definitely make kind of a safety commitment. And there was a semi going by. Okay, the fourth speaker, which apparently does use RAMP in their courses, their talk had absolutely nothing to do with RAMP, in which case they were doing a safety wet lab. So normally we talk about safety almost kind of in lecture or in pre-lab, maybe do some dry lab stuff. They basically realized there was a lot of anxiety with their students using the chemicals. So this was both a skills development, but also in many more respects, a confidence developing one. And so they basically ran through the safety ones and actually had the students do it. So, okay, we're going to clean up a chemical spill. Here's some powdered sugar. Oh, look, it's on the bench. Go clean it up, and have every student do that. Same goes for some water, some ethanol. Oh, we've got an acid spill. It's vinegar, but so everything nice and safe, but they actually have to do it. They did broken glass. They actually did a Lego beaker so that they didn't actually have broken glass. I don't know. I'd probably just do a test too, but yeah, I can see their point. Then they also had all the students push the eye wash station, pull the safety shower, use a fire extinguisher. They had like a training simulating fire extinguisher. Their emergency or their health and safety office handled that, but it was also brought up that local fire departments may very well be useful for contacting. I know we did that in grad school during orientation. I thought that was very valuable. We actually used a real fire extinguisher on a real fire. It was like a barbecue. So I think that's something that was very helpful. This was for their seniors, and they're looking to implement a scaled down version for Gen Chem. I think this would be something great to do with at least the juniors or seniors. And frankly, the faculty wouldn't be bad to do this also. And then they did more. They just basically filled up a 3-hour lab period. So whatever their lab they happened to have all the students in, I think it was like a capstone lab of some sort. They just did all of this. And I think they said the total cost was like $15 to do this per student, you know, not total, but it was per student. So not unreasonable, a little pricey, but not unreasonable at all, especially if you're comparing it to, you know, the expensive chemicals we get to buy for some of the labs. I mean, it's nothings for some powdered sugar and whatnot. Okay, so that's wrapping things up. Conference has been good overall. Enjoyed the conference. UC Madison, nice campus, very sprawling, very big. I have walked so much, but I'm off to Mackinac Island. I probably going to end the video here, but who knows? You might see me on the island. And with that said, have a wonderful day. If I know you, I will see you in the near future. If I don't, welcome to the channel, kind of thing. And yeah, have a wonderful day. Okay, from the scenery change, you can kind of guess I'm not in Wisconsin anymore. I'm on the island of Mackinac. You can also probably guess this is not the GoPro. This is my phone. I wasn't expecting to actually record here. There are flies everywhere. After BCCE, I swung by the island of Mackinac, see the forest. Well, St. Ignace, took the ferry to see the island of Mackinac, and the GoPro's back in St. Ignace. Reason I'm recording this, I wasn't really planning on, but one of the comments made at BCCE is the American Chemical Society wants us to start using case studies for teaching green chemistry, which is a little bit awkward. Case studies are definitely used in some of the safety world, which I think is why they want to do that. Sorry, I hope you're not getting too wiggly here. And they're used heavily in law, business, and medical education, but really not in science. Science, we usually just teach the model straight up. So, one of the things I'm doing is kind of keeping an eye out, bugs, for case studies. And Fort Mackinac, lots of bugs. Fort Mackinac actually has an interesting example. In their original hospital, they've got a nice exhibit, and I'll pop a couple of pictures I took with my phone up on the screen, where they have a video playing in kind of a loop, doing 3 case studies. And the way they've done this is they've got the 1837 surgeon for the fort, or actor dressed as him. Obviously, he's passed a long time ago. That was a long, long time ago. But they've got an actor dressed as him, and he's reading the notes from the surgeon. Or, you know, interpreting from the note. So about 3 patients. One has TB, one has a broken leg, and one has cancer. And so he gives his diagnosis, his treatment, basically, and then whether or not it worked. It's like, okay, well, I tried this for this patient. It helped some. I did this. I think he's going to be fine. This patient's basically dead. Pretty much in that order. Then they had another actor dressed as a modern physician. Then she went by and did a description of what we would say today. It's like, this patient had tuberculosis. They didn't know what tuberculosis was in 1837. We have antibiotics, but that wasn't developed until the 1940s for TB. I think it's like 46, 47. This patient has a broken bone. This is exactly what we would have done, just with slightly different materials. Plaster casts hadn't been invented yet, so he was using leather. X-rays didn't exist in 1837. We would have done an X-ray. We would be really stressed out by not having an X-ray, but, you know, he knew enough to be able to do it without it, because once again, those hadn't been invented yet. That would be the 1880s, I think. And then this patient, where he didn't know what was wrong, died a horrible, painful death. Like, yeah, this would have been colorectal cancer. We could have cured that had it been diagnosed early, but by the time the symptoms were enough for him to go into, medical treatment, yeah, he would have been just as dead in 2026 as he was in 1837. we may have helped a little bit, kind of thing. So it was kind of this interesting one. So one way of doing case studies that might be interesting for us, especially in kind of the green chem, is coming at it from 2 points of view. Is, you know, hey, I'm a chemist from 1960 something, here's what I would do, you know, gallon of benzene, wash my hands in it or whatever. And then, hey, I'm a chemist from 2026, here's why I'm not going to do that, I'm going to do something else. So it might be an interesting way of juxtaposing. I'm thinking of shopping for old-timey looking lab coats so I can do a quick change in the middle of class. I don't know. Just a thought as a way of juxtaposing ideas, is having two different, you know, eras and describing what we were doing, and then the modern one kind of just like, okay, that worked, but no. Or that worked, and we're just going to do it with computers now because we've got those. That kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to hang out a little bit more on Mackinac Island, cross the bridge, and head back home. And so with that said, have a wonderful day. I will see you later on.